everybody. This is Chloe Hudson with World Peace Projects, and thank you for joining me. So welcome to the Quitola Loop in Ecuador. You are in Isinvlí. I hope I'm saying that town correctly. And I wanted to bring you the Q&A. Thank you everybody who offers questions. And if I do not have your questions on this Q&A, it is because I currently don't have my laptop with me. So this is all of the questions that I was able to gather. Okay, so Ahimsa Sarvatra asks, do you have any advice for people who wish to develop and awaken spiritually but seem to struggle with spiritual practices? Personally, I've tried many different meditation techniques over the year, but nothing seems to really work for me. And I feel like I never make any progress. Is there such a thing as spiritual talent? Why is it that some people seem to have spontaneous awakenings without really doing any spiritual practices, while others work on themselves and try to raise their level of consciousness for years, yet never seem to get anywhere? And do you have any words of advice for those who are or feel less talented? Are these apparent limitations related to karma or soul contracts? And if so, what can those hindered by them do to develop and awaken spiritually? So Ahimsa, this is a pretty interesting question because there's a lot of reasons, in my opinion. Yes, absolutely. This can be soul contracts. This can be karmic. This can be blocks in your field. This could be curses set up in past. This could also have to do with people not being grounded enough so that even when the messages come forward to be received, the human doesn't compute them. That happens a lot. And I do think that a lot of people have written in their soul contracts that it will be more easy for them in a way to open up to certain things. So usually my rule of thumb is your greatest challenges in life are your grandest masteries in the other side, in your soul level. So often if we have mastered certain things like, certain techniques that I think you're relating to or talking of, and we are not experiencing, if you've mastered them on a soul level and you're not experiencing them as a human, it could very well be because you're still working to fine-tune your mastery. So your soul says, hey, I know so much about this and that, but these little couple things I really want to get really honed in. And so you create contracts for your human when you come and descend down into this reality, that you'll have these challenges to experience so that you dive in even more than you might if it was that much more easy to you. So there's a lot of reasons it could be. From the way I navigate, the way you could clarify this is if receive a session. I'm happy to help you understand what is the exact block, what's going on, because there could be so many things that is blocking it or that maybe you're not hearing it. There's a lot of reasons for that. Though in regard to general awareness of what you can do, if you haven't already been doing this, grounding, clearing, that one's huge. A lot of messages, and Monica has a question about this a few questions down. A lot of messages and understandings come forward, though we don't receive them because we're not grounded. We are electricity. We have to ground this electricity to make it efficient and use it. And then we have to run our energy and clear. And then we have to work on our intuitional body and trust that what we're actually receiving is valid. And if it's not, if you feel that that's not accurate, dive into why not. What belief systems are kicking in for you that aren't assisting you to open up. Maybe you haven't given yourself permission subconsciously to receive the abilities, the ESPs or whatever it is you're specifically desiring to activate and utilize. So there's lots of reasons for this. And again, with meditation, I don't think meditation's for everybody. Meditation, especially the type of meditation where you work to clear your mind and have no thoughts and just be completely present, is very difficult. I find it much more easy and efficient for a while to utilize a moving meditation or a guided meditation, because if you're having difficulty with your monkey mind, as we call it, it's a lot easier to follow something or act, move around or do something so that your mind feels at ease because it's engaged. And then your soul and your consciousness can really step up while your mind plays and is happy over there. And then you can really start to utilize that space. So it could be also that the types of meditation you're using aren't that efficient for you. I think that it's very difficult to get to transcendental meditation. I think that that is more of an advanced practice that I don't necessarily find might be the most efficient, in the beginning. So I hope that answers your questions. But if you want a really clear, specific answer, I'm going to suggest you receive a healing so we can get to the brass tacks of it and find out what's the exact block. Okay, Parker Hammer. What is DMT from a higher dimensional perspective? Also, what happens when you smoke it? And what's the difference between 5-MeO DMT and NN-DMT from a multidimensional perspective? Parker, I don't really know, honestly. DMT, I know they call the God molecule. And from what I've heard of it, it gives you the ability to tap in to the all consciousness and find that awareness and experiential knowing that you are one. So it taps us back into that experience or perspective and sensations that we are source all that is, that there's no more limitations, you're boundless. Now, obviously there is a organic DMT that our brain produces and activates when we have these experiences. Though I'm thinking that the ones you're asking about are synthetic. And with any, in my opinion, with any substances that are synthetic or even natural, but opening you up to a higher state or experience, such as ayahuasca, such as mescaline, mushrooms, you name it. All of these experiences, albeit can be extremely enlightening and profound for many people. They've assisted many people in their spiritual works and awakenings and requiring and asking for assistance. Though ultimately, as the guides have, I've channeled this before, the guides have said, the High Council of the Hathors told me one time that we were talking specifically about mushrooms. And they said that that space is kind of a false reality. So you enter into a resonance or a dimensionality that you're experiencing at the time is real, though it's no more real than this matrix. It's simply a different created matrix that offers you different utilizations of the dimensionalities and the frequencies in your experience. So it's still not the true experience of source essence. And it's going to be like that, in my opinion, with any synthetics. It may give you that experience of it so that you know what that might be like. Though ultimately, as I heard Florbrun said, I think in one of her videos, is that, and this is a good point, her teacher told her that, if you need a substance or something to get you to that level where you can have these, extrasensory experiences, you'll never be able to hold that baseline and activate it and utilize it yourself. So therefore, it might be enjoyable in the time of doing it, and it might give you an aha moment, though, you won't be able to hold that resonance. So you're going to bottom back down. And another thing, in my opinion, to be very careful with, and this one is interesting because it's delicate, because if you don't have the ability yet to experience and understand soul fracturing and energetic exchange and all of these things from a clairvoyant perspective or a clairsentient perspective or any of your clairs, then you might not be aware of what happens often with certain substances, is that the soul has a soul fracture. So a lot of times, this happens a lot. I've done a lot of sessions to clean this up and assist, is that when one partakes, often there is such an out-of-body experience in so many different ways that you have a soul fracture. And when you ground back into your body, you didn't fully ground back in the way that you were before. And another thing that's come up that I haven't done my ayahuasca part 2 video, but for example, with that type of substance, if you're doing these substances in a space where there's other people, you're immediately, once it kicks in, dissolving the energetic boundaries that most of us hold on a day-to-day. So most of us in our cognitive awareness know that when somebody gets too close to our space, we're a little bit uncomfortable, or if somebody says something that pushes our boundaries, we're aware of it. So energetically speaking, that's a way that we're consciously and physically aware of energy boundaries. Well, when you're utilizing substances often with other people, and even animals, right? But usually people have more of their own shadow energies, subconsciously. Though when we dissolve these boundaries and we participate in these substances, absolutely, you're shifting and switching energies and substances, and the beings and the aspects and all sorts of stuff are doing this. And you may leave that activity with others' energetics or entities or beings in your being. And that happens a lot as well. So that's something to be aware of. So I don't really have clear answers on DMT other than knowing that it's, the God molecule that activates that experience of the all that is. Though, because for me, I don't really need substances. I don't participate in these bigger awakening substances that a lot of people might be intrigued by or attracted to. So I hope that answers your question a bit, Parker. Okay, so Monica says, first question, how do I upgrade myself to different realms, frequencies, or dimensions? How do I know what they are or know what to ask for? So that's an interesting question, Monica, because it is difficult, I think, to know what's going on. So for example, many of us that are participating and watching these kind of videos and seeking guidance, we've tapped into the fourth dimensionality. And the fourth dimensionality is kind of like a flow space as we move through the fourth dimension into the fifth. And we become cognitive that there's more than just good and bad. We start to look at ourselves in a much more conscious way. We start to engage into opening up the subconscious. We start to have ideas around spatial time and space. We start to look at these experiences of polarity and shift up into a resonance of compassion and knowledge, and out of that experience of judgment and good and bad and dark and evil, light and dark. So this is one very general way to be aware that you're shifting, or you have fully shifted into the fourth dimensionality. Now, the fifth dimensionality starts to open up as we become more fine-tuned to our conscious selves as multidimensional beings. So the fifth dimensionality is a space where you really begin to observe self, bypassing belief systems. It's a much more cognitive process. It shifts very much into a higher echelon, is how I'm going to term it, of compassion. And we begin an exchange where we've dissolved so much of our polarity essence. We've come into a balance of our masculine feminine that now we upgrade into what I like to term sublevels, or some of the masters term octaves, because there are very clear graduational processes through the dimensions and all of the sublevels and the levels of this. So once we shift into that next octave of beginning a educational experience of balancing the compassion to knowledge, compassion to wisdom, that begets the higher frequency of polarity existence, which we will begin to dive into and explore in fifth dimensionality. So it can be very vague. It's a difficult thing if you're not schooled in the sublevels and the octaves and the frequencies of that. Though fifth dimensionality very much has that experience. And of course it's fleeting, because that's how humans learn. We learn in regression. And a big experience that we're moving out of right now is replication. How can we be more conscious and authentic and let go of our replication, of our redundancy, of needing to repeat patterns? How can we get out of that cyclical loop that we've been experiencing? And that's something as well that in fourth dimension you start to look at. And once you begin to open that up, you're definitely accessing the lower fifth dimensional realms. How do we let go of this polarity, this separation consciousness, this duality and all forms of that balance? How do we shift into simply being completely cognitive that we are all that is? We exist in all now moments. Therefore, we don't need to bind ourselves to the limitations of linear time by any means. These are fifth dimensional experiences that in fourth dimension we start to look at in theory. Now, how are some of the ways that we can help ourselves? Well, there's a lot of ways. Working on your compassion. If you've done all of your shadow work or most of your shadow work, you'll know that, because a lot of us have done copious, and I know, Monica, you've done copious amounts of your shadow work. And so we get to a place where we register how valuable that is. Though we are aware that now it begins a time for us to realize we don't need to continue to indulge in shadow work and move our energy and our focus into the spaces that we prefer to experience. And we begin to understand very much, I think a huge key to this is really anchoring the knowing that it's all frequency. All of it is about frequency. All of it is about thought and how that thought moves forward and what that thought creates energetically and vibrationally, and then how we navigate that thought. Are we still acting, reacting? Are we moving through with conscious, specific engagement with life and experience? Are we aware that just because something is happening in our perceived future does not mean we haven't experienced this before? Are we navigating our timelines in a way where we're very clear that everything that we feel inside, experience, put out, react or respond to, even if it's our own mental quiet process or emotional engagement in observing something or receiving somebody, this is begetting our timeline. We're literally, taking a step. And then that stone shows up right under your foot as you're putting it down. So are you in a space yet where you can realize that you are not a victim, or you are not susceptible to simply what's being laid out in front of you, and then you have to figure out or strategize how to navigate that? You are creating. We are creating. So moving into this awareness more and more that is something that's just how it is. As easy as you know how to tie your shoes, it becomes that much of your life. You don't have to think about it anymore. It's your process. It's your experience. So at this point, gauging the things that we're still working on experientially, but we know in theory, we still have bad moods. We still get upset. We still get triggered. We still feel victim to our day or stress. We still can't figure out how to surrender and trust what the universe is bringing forward as we're putting out. Up-leveling our frequency and our harmonics. Registering anytime fear or resistance or, impermanence type of mentalities or energies are engaging in our being that we feel victim to, or that upset us or drop our baseline frequency, as I like to call it. These are the very important things to look at and focus on, in my opinion, to help raise our energetics. Because ultimately, as creators and architects of our reality, it's no longer about finding our mission or our purpose. It's about adventure, curiosity, experiential fun, being a kid, playing, not feeling controlled or anchored to any expectations, obligations, exchanges with other people. Rebecca Dawson channels Saint Germain, Serapis Bey, and Lord Cthulhu, and they speak very elegantly, obviously, as masters that they are, about these topics. They have some really grand awarenesses around this and how to shift ourselves out of this experience of balance even, where our bodies and our being aren't as delicate and docile. We don't have to tiptoe as much as we think. Watch this diet, don't do that, because if you do that, this happens. Oh no, I hurt my neck and now my back hurts. These chain reactions. This is all another part of the matrix that we have to suspend our belief system around, that we're controlled by these limitations, and really access our multidimensionality. Easy ways to do that. Get curious. What would it be like? Let me tap into remembering how cool it was when I could fly in the days of Lemuria. I have that cellular memory. Things like this. So it doesn't have to be so serious or philosophical or dogmatic anymore. It's about fun fun and joy and contentment, really raises our frequency, and it's all about frequency. So let it be more simple. We need to get back to simplicity. Things are simple. Creator source is one. All is inhabited within that oneness. The complexity that we have been entrained into as humans is very confusing, and it is a trap. It's much easier than we think. It really is. So work on the simplicity of life in all things. Okay, your second question is, I am trying to figure out why there is an inconsistency in getting answers back for questions that I ask of my guides. Sometimes no answer, immediate feeling, or some delay via dream states or just knowing. Sometimes modes are mixed between feeling, images, or words. Any idea why? So again, as I was addressing with Ahimsa, I think the number one for me with this one, because this is experienced a lot with people who channel and mediums, is grounding, first of all. Getting ego out of the way. That's the huge one. If you want to talk about why are channelers so inconsistent, all of us. I don't care who you are. All of us have inconsistencies, and we have infiltrations, and we have interference. So there's many parts to this, and I believe it's the same thing, because when you're bringing in guidance or knowing, you're also channeling. Just because you're not speaking it out, you're doing the same thing. You're channeling all day long. You're bringing energy in and moving it through you. So a big one is grounding. As I was saying, we need to ground and clear our energy. So when we feel energetically cleansed and grounded and present in that now moment, because ultimately the now moment is the only space you can actually purely channel from. So getting to that space where it almost feels as time is suspended, you're in your heart, you're in pure observational mode, and you're tapping into simply receive. You have no expectations, first of all, because that's an easy, simple one. You might be blocking the energy because you're expecting and hoping it to come. So checking on these, right? And then grounding your energetics, and then just trusting what you receive, because there is a knee-jerk reaction often that our mind wants to doubt immediately, whatever comes in. And your intuition, especially when you're in a place where you're not receiving messages so cleanly and purely and continuously that it's easy peasy. So there's always doubt that's engaging when that happens. And that means also you're still strengthening your intuitional muscles. So when that's happening, your intuition is much more quiet than your mind. It will always be a more subtle, gentle, quiet voice, subtle notion or knowing or impulse. And it's going to be in this space. Sometimes you'll hear the guides in your mind, though ultimately I advise bring it into your heart. And just trust in that. Allow that to be a truth. Even if your mind questions it, allow your mind to question it. Though trust what's coming through experientially. And then acknowledge and validate your intuition for that. Thank you, intuition. That's what I heard. Even though my mind's not sure if that's accurate or not, I really appreciate receiving that. Bring more. There has to be this relationship that you build with your intuition to let it know. Hey, thanks, intuition. I heard you. Hey, heart space, I heard you. Hey, guides, I know you're answering me. I really appreciate that. Continue to validate and expand and work on that. And when you do feel like you received intuition that's pure and clean, revel in that. Have that experience. Take a few moments to say, oh, that felt really nice. And then the doubt experiences, the mind experience, they're always going to be louder. They might not make sense very much. They might engage fear. The energy might be more harsh and abrupt than you would expect a guide to be. So it's really being patient with it, in my opinion, because you're always receiving the answers. If you are asking and it's from a heart-aligned space, your guides are answering. Your higher self is answering. And also another thing I think that's really important is humans, we tend to have a fixation on wanting the answers consciously. Most of the work we do, as you're saying, is in dream time. It's much more efficient often for our higher selves and our soul and our guides to bypass our mental space, our subconscious, and offer us up the work as we're astral traveling. So trust in that. Trust that you already have the answer. You're simply just not cognitive of it yet. So there's a lot of ways you can expand on this. And then there's interference. There's constant interference. If we're on this earth, we're receiving interference. That's the way this matrix is set up right now. So that's another thing that happens a lot with channeling. Channelers often start out pure intending, good at heart, clean and clear, and they're bringing through the being that they actually have asked to communicate. And then as the channel continues on, then there's another being who can slide in unbeknownst to the channeler and start giving false information. And then, of course, as the human that's channeling activates their mind or their ego, it immediately puts a filter over what's coming forth. If your energy vacillates, if you get excited, if you get tired, all of these things, there's so many things that can shift our resonance because we still believe in the balance and the duality, and that one little thing can knock us off, off kilter. That can shift our energetics so that we had a flow, but then it got blocked. And that's just the way it is. Just let that be okay and relax, go have some fun, try again. So I would say keep at it. Be really grateful for the ways that you're receiving. And another thing that I feel impulse to tell you, Monica, is a lot of times people expect to receive the messages in a very particular way, but they might actually be more efficient at receiving it in a different way. For example, let's say you're wanting the visual. Let's say you're wanting to see it energetically, though you're much more attuned at your sense of smell. So let's say you call on Mother Mary and you're hoping, to see the energies or even maybe feel her palpably, though she brings you the scent of a rose. So that's something that could easily be looked over, but that's a very clear message from her. And that sense of smell is also encoded. So know that there are so many different ways that we could be receiving these messages that we might not think about. So be open to that. Get curious and look at, what are some of the probably definitive ways, because they bring us messages in many, many different ways that we're experiencing that we're not aware of. Get curious. So thanks so much, you guys, for tuning in. It's starting to drizzle out here. I think I'm going to go inside. If you would like to reach me and receive a healing or an intuitive channeling, my website is worldpeaceprojects.global. And please send me some questions. I love engaging with you guys. I hope you're well. You take care. Bye-bye.